I know this isn't Overdress news, but apparently Granblue got Drop Zone Timeleap plays in reverse to utilize for a lot of multi-attacks. And that means I need to talk about it.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another extra edition of Cardfight Update, and today we've got some more information concerning the reveals for Clan Selection Plus Volume 1, and these are of course the new Granblue reveals. Now, these cards were revealed alongside with the extra edition and news updates for the Overdress announcement, but as you already saw yesterday with already 2 long videos, there was already way than enough to talk about on that particular day, only about Overdress. So that's why we're gonna dedicate this video today for just Granblue cards, because they do deserve their own video, because they're quite interesting in how they function, what they can do, their synergy, and also their potential for maybe premium in the future. With that notion, let's dive straight into these new cards and see what these new Ghostie cards can do for V Premium as well as regular Premium. So here we have the brand new Grade 1 Ghostie, which is Damien the Ghostie. And its abilities are Auto Vanguard the Vanguard Circle. When placed from hand, search your deck for up to 1 card with Ghostie in its card name, put it into your drop zone, and shuffle your deck. So this is just a nice way to filter your deck as well as setting up your drop zone. Now, on first glance, this doesn't really sound that amazing because most Ghostie cards aren't really that impactful. But if you look at Premium as well as in V-Series right now, there are some interesting synergistic plays and certain Ghostie cards that you might want to have in your drop zone for potential future options. So there is somewhat something here, but this will become more apparent once we take a look at the other support cards. But then we also have the second ability, which is Auto Vanguard Circle. At the end of the battle it attacked, if you have a Vanguard with Ghostie in its card name, cost retire this unit, and if you did not countercharge by the ability of Damien the Ghostie this turn, countercharge 1. So effectively he can kill himself off to gain a countercharge. Sadly it only works if your Vanguard is also Ghostie, so it's quite restrictive, but in the upcoming Ghostie deck that's going to come out from this set, it is actually a pretty amazing skill, but it all becomes more clear once we take a look at the other cards. So let's take a look at the Grade 2, which works very similar to this Grade 1, because the Grade 2 that we've got is this Grade 2 Jesse the Ghostie, and its abilities are Act and Drop Zone, cost retire 2 rearguards not named Jesse the Ghostie, and call this card to the rearguard circle. This ability may only be used by a card with the same card name once a turn. So it's not a way to resurrect your own units for free effectively. It doesn't cost you soul blast or counter blast, which is nice if you want to repopulate the board, but at the same time you do have to sacrifice 2 rearguards to get 1 rearguard, which might sound awkward and bad in a generic sense, but there's actually some playability here, and it all comes into play with his second ability and its synergy with the other cards, because its second ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, this unit gets power plus 5k until the end of the battle. At the end of the battle, retire this unit, and if you did not countercharge by the ability of Jesse the Ghostie this turn, countercharge 1. So both the Grade 1 and the Grade 2 can countercharge at least once a turn, which is nice if you want to generate more counterblast if you're using a counterblast heavy deck, which the new Ghostie deck is definitely going to be. But effectively, this card allows you to trade off 2 cards for a potential 14k attack, not a body because it retires itself, and a countercharge, which might sound not as the greatest deal, but depending in the scenario, if you need counterblast, this could be really useful as it also denies potential damage denying. But if we look at the vein with the synergistic plays with Dancing Cutlass, which can resurrect himself from the drop zone to the field, then we can actually see a massive countercharge engine, because Cutlass can generate countercharge while putting bodies onto the board, and then you can also retire that Dancing Cutlass with Jesse the Ghostie to generate even more countercharge, but by sending that Cutlass to the drop zone means also that you probably can utilize Dancing Cutlass a lot faster than usual, which means you have a really strong countercharge engine on your hand with both these 2 Ghostie cards as well as Dancing Cutlass. But it becomes even more apparent what we want to do once we look at the new Grade 3, which we're gonna do right now. Because the brand new Grade 3 for Ghosties is Ghostie Leader Beatrice. And Beatrice has the following abilities: Auto Vanguard the Vanguard Circle. When placed, costs Soul Blast 1, and call a card not named Ghostie Leader Beatrice from your drop zone to the rearguard circle. Now, before we're going to take a look at the other skills, This in itself is an incredibly powerful skill that makes her a very nice utility card for generic plays in Premium as well as just generic Granblue in V. Because this effectively is a Pirate Swordsman Column Bard that doesn't cost a Counterblast, but it costs a Soul Blast. The only difference is that it doesn't select a card from your deck and send it to your drop zone. But it does allow you to superior call an extra unit onto the board once this card is placed. So all the Nitros plays that you can do with Column Bard, you can basically do that with Beatrice as well, but instead of a Counterblast, it costs you a Soul Blast, which means it's less Counterblast heavy on your resources, which can be really good for Nitros in the circumstances where your opponent is damage denying you. But in Premium, you will have all kinds of plays, even with the potential G-Guards they have access to with Skeleton Cannoneer. If you combine these cards really nice together, you could have the Denial Griffin. Probably go watch Salam Vanguard's video about this, because he can explain this way better than I can, because he is more experienced with Granblue. But the main part is, this card opens up a lot of really nice plays, and the fact that this is a Soul Blast cost instead of a Counterblast also means you have more options to utilize your resources for different aspects. So that's already a really good, nice skill that allows her to be utilized in any type of generic deck. But let's take a look at the other skills, which makes her an ideal boss unit for the Ghostie deck, and it also makes Ghostie decks an actual really good, solid engine. Because her second ability is Continuous Vanguard Circle. All of your units with Ghostie in their card names on Rearguard Circle or Guardian Circle gets Intercept and Power plus 5k and Shield plus 5k. This means that the grade 2 and the grade 1 that we just talked about are actually a lot stronger when they are attacking than retiring themselves for Counterblast, which is really nice because that means your offensive plays are actually a lot better. But we have a lot of low graded Ghostie cards, and even the heal trigger is a Ghostie card, which means that even the heal trigger becomes a lot better, as seen as this skill works also on the Guardian Circle, so all the Ghostie cards in your hand actually become really solid defensive options. So this deck will have a really strong defensive play, and means it can actually stall quite effectively thanks to the inherent extra shield value. And because units get Intercept, you can actually play with Protect 2, meaning you can call those units to the field, and if you do not utilize the grade 1 and the grade 2 that retire themselves, you can have a unit ready onto the board and then intercept away with it with actual extra shield. Let's say, for example, if you call down the heal trigger, that's 35k shield you have on the field that you can utilize whenever you want. Now granted, it is vulnerable for retire, but if you're up against a deck that cannot retire your stuff, this can be a really nice way to add on to your defensive plays. But more importantly, don't forget, you can just call them from your hand and they will have the extra inherent shield power. So not only really nice offensive option, it's also really good for defensive plays. But then we get to the third ability, and that is where everything starts to click together and we see what this deck actually wants to do. Because her third ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When your rearguard is retired by a card's ability during your turn, cost, Counterblast 1, and call a card with Ghostie in its card name and grade less than the grade of the retired unit from your drop zone to the rearguard circle. So what this effect is basically when one of your rearguards, and it doesn't have to be a Ghostie unit, gets retired, you can use the one Counterblast to superior call a unit with one grade lower that has the Ghostie name to the field. And as seen as the grade 2 and the grade 1 Ghostie kills themselves off after the attack, you can use them to activate this skill. So let's say, for example, you attack with the grade 2 Ghostie, it kills itself, then you can activate this skill to Counterblast 1 to recall the grade 1 Ghostie, it attacks, it kills itself, and then you can superior call a potential grade 0 to the field with a Ghostie name and attack with it as well. This is effectively Timeleap in reverse. But the awesome part here is that the grade 2 and the grade 1 generates counter charge. So if you go from the grade 2 to the grade 1, that's free of cost because you generate the counter charge, but then you use the counterblast. Then from the grade 1 to the grade 0, you generate a counterblast and you use the counterblast. So effectively you generate free attacks and it doesn't cost you anything for it, but you end up on a grade 0 onto the field that has intercept, and because it's a grade 0, has inherently more power. And interesting enough, we have two solid targets to go into. If we want to go for a more offensive option, we can use Chappie the Ghostie, which gets a potential extra 10k power, so it's a 15k beater on its own, plus the 5k of Beatrice, that's 20k power. If we utilize Protect 2, and now Protect 2 becomes a lot more apparent why we want to use it, because every unit gets the extra power of the Protect marker, then suddenly that Chappie the Ghostie grade 0 isn't just 5k, but it's actually 25k with all the addition to the power itself. But if we want to go for a more defensive option, we can just use the heal trigger, which is Rick the Ghostie, and we have a solid 35k shield unit on the field ready to basically give us a solid defense option for whatever attack might be thrown at us. But this is not even where this all stops, because this is just using the grade 2 and the grade 1 that can kill themselves off and utilize their skills. But there are two other units that synergize perfectly with this deck, and those are Ghost Ship and Skull Dragon, because both these cards kill themselves off after they attacked. So these cards also trigger Beatrice, and that means you can go from a Skull Dragon to the grade 2 to the grade 1 and then to a grade 0, all for the cost of just one single counterblast. And you did attack 4 times in one single column, and then you can also do that on the other side of the column. Now keep in mind, this will then be a lot more costly because the grade 2 and the grade 1 only can countercharge once a turn, so the other side will probably cost you a lot more counterblast. But that is then where, let's say for example, the Cutlass interaction with the grade 2 comes into play. And if you think to yourself, how am I supposed to put Ghost Ship or Skull Dragon onto the field? Well, you can do that with Beatrice as well, because the moment that you ride Beatrice, you can use her on place effect to superior call a Skull Dragon from the drop zone, and you're all said and done if you have the grade 2 and the grade 1 in your drop zone. And for the other side of the column, you can just utilize the grade 2 Jesse the Ghostie skill from drop zone to retire any 2 units of the field, and it recalls it to the field, and you have another unit that retires himself from the field after its attacks, and you have even more combo potential with this grade 3. So it's possible, if you have the counterblast, you could potentially generate 9 attacks. 4 on the right column, 4 on the left column, and then of course your Vanguard swing as well. Now granted, that will probably cost you around 4 counterblasts in total, so it's not very likely, but you can definitely think about the potential of having 6-7 attacks in a single turn with the right setup in your drop zone. And that is all paired with the extra defensive options you have thanks to the increase of the shield value from all your Ghostie cards, and the fact that you end up on a grade 0 which can intercept, and it has the Ghostie name, so that's even more shield you generate. So you multi-attack with strong beaters that almost cost you nothing, and you end up on defensive options that can help you to stall into the next turn, where you can then potentially try to beat your opponent again with all your multi-attack plays. If that sounds familiar, this is basically what Timeleap was during its heyday, because they could multi-attack for crazy for almost no cost, and they end up with a gigantic hand size and filtering the deck, meaning defensive options are very much happening because defensive triggers will probably go off on one of the attacks they're going to generate. So that was also so that meant that Timeleap was almost impossible to kill, and the next turn they would do their offensive plays all over again. And I get the same feeling about this Beatrice Ghostie deck as well. Now, granted, is it as strong and as easy to set up as Timeleap? Probably not, because you need to set up your drop zone, and that might be a bit too slow or might be a bit inconsistent. But thanks to the fact that Damien can selectively mill you cards with Ghostie in its name, means you can at least set up the grade 2 and grade 1 and grade 0 into your drop zone, and maybe even Beatrice herself if you have a way to fetch a card from the drop zone and you're missing your grade 3 right target. Let's say, for example, Greed Shade. So there are a lot of options available to this deck, and I think it's actually quite a fun deck to play and could have some future potential in Premium with even more Ghostie support. So I think it's a pretty decent deck. But that's everything that I want to discuss about this particular card. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of these new cards for Granblue. Do you think there's a lot of potential? Do you think it's a really fun, neat little deck to play? And of course, what's your thought of the future potential of what we're going to get? Because we know for a fact that V is going to get support in the future, but we have no clue what Granblue might get next time, as the horizons is basically infinite here, and it could be crazy. But that said, I want to give a huge shout out to my Patreon supporters over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider for making this video and everything on the channel possible. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a patron today. But with that said, I'm Timeleap, and I see you guys in the next one.